912, Big 550, KTRS. All right. So, lots going on in the world. And we're going to leave Ferguson for a little bit. And we're going to leave the county race. And we're going to talk about, with some phone numbers here, 314-969-KTRS, 1-888-550-KTRS, or star KTRS. Those are the phone numbers. And the text line is open at 84126. We're going to talk about something in which everybody talks about. When anybody talks about this, their eyes gloss over. I truly believe that when myself, this is just the experience I've had, when I talk about, businesses, corporations giving money to politicians, businesses, corporations buying lunch for elected officials, right? The state, we as taxpayers give these people a stipend for lunch, and then the lobbyists come in and pay these guys for lunches, right? Access, all of those things. Politicians get beat up for, and I don't think the public generally cares. And however, I think it's our responsibility to keep talking about it and keep, maybe someday somebody will care. But the only thing who's keeping people abreast of how much money who's giving who is the media. And I know that I don't give people money for no reason. And I know every time I've gone in for a raise, they hold on to the businesses, the corporations I've worked for, the business I've worked for, hold on to their money like it's their last nickel. But then you read a story about how hey, look at this person giving this campaign hundreds of thousands of dollars. Look at this guy giving him $50,000. Hey, here's $100,000 a plate dinner. Why do these people show up for these $100,000 a plate dinners? Right? I try and sell a dinner. Come over to my house. I'll give you a free hamburger and a free hot dog. Just listen to me. They don't really show up. But if I'm an elected official, it's amazing how many people want to show up and listen and give money. Which is why I read so interestingly yesterday in the New York Times. There's a story written by Eric Lipton, and the headline of the story is Lobbyists Bearing Gifts Pursue Attorneys General. So I just came across this story, and let me read for you the first two paragraphs. This out of the New York Times yesterday. When executives who distribute 5-Hour Energy, the popular caffeinated drinks, learned that the attorneys general in more than 30 states were investigating allegations of deceptive advertising, a serious financial threat to the company, they moved quickly to shut off the investigations down one state at a time. But success did not come in court or at the negotiating table. Instead, it came at the opulent Lowe's Santa Monica Beach Hotel in California, with its panoramic ocean views, where more than a dozen state attorneys generals had gathered last year for cocktails, dinner, and fundraisers organized by the Democratic Attorneys General Association. A lawyer for 5-Hour Energy roamed the event, setting her sights on, wait for it, on Attorney General Chris Koster of Missouri, whose office was one of those investigating the company. My client just received notification that Missouri is on this, the lawyer Lori Kamani told him. The law firm Dixon Shapiro had courted the attorney general at dinners and conferences with thousands of dollars in campaign contributions. Mr. Koster told the attorney that he was unaware of the investigation, and he reached for his phone and called his office. By the end of the weekend, he had ordered his staff to pull out of the inquiry, a clear victory for 5-Hour Energy. The quick reversal, confirmed by Mr. Koster and this lawyer, was part of a pattern of successful lobbying of Mr. Koster by the law firm on behalf of clients like Pfizer and AT&T, and evidence of a largely hidden dynamic at work in state attorney general offices across the country. Attorney generals are now the object of aggressive pursuit by lobbyists and lawyers who use campaign contributions, personal appeals, and lavish corporate-sponsored conferences and other means to push them to drop investigations, change policies, negotiate favorable sentiments, or pressure federal regulators, an investigation by the New York Times has found. A robust industry of lobbyists and lawyers have blossomed as attorneys generals have joined to conduct multi-state investigations and pushed into areas as diverse as securities fraud and internet crimes. But unlike the lobbying rules covering other elected officials, there are few revolving door restrictions or disclosure requirements governing state attorneys generals who serve as the people's lawyers by protecting consumers and individual citizens. And the story goes from there. This story appearing in the New York Times yesterday. Now, it has more about Attorney General Chris Koster. Chris Koster, who is, I don't know if he's officially announced that he's running for governor, but he's going to be running for governor, and he's the odds-on Democratic favorite to win the Democratic nomination to become the next governor of the great state of Missouri. Now, I ask you, this is a question, and this is a story that he's probably going to have to answer. He knew it was coming because he sat down with this reporter in Kansas City and asked questions or answered questions about this story. But the story is basically that, hey, I think the story, and I'm saying, and everyone else is saying, hey, just by the mere fact that you give a politician money does not mean they're dirty. But it looks horrific. It looks terrible. You and your state is planning an investigation into 5-hour Energy for deceptive trade practices, for deceptive marketing, for deceptive advertising. And lo and behold, at a soiree on the beach of California, a lawyer knocks on your door and says, oh, by the way, do you know, hold on a second, let me call somebody. And by the weekend, that investigation is over with? I'm not saying there's anything wrong, but I think Attorney General Chris Koster should probably have to answer questions as to why did that investigation go away? And doesn't it seem obvious that this company who has given you hundreds of thousands of dollars for your campaign, guess what? Lo and behold, this just doesn't look right. Now, let me scoot down a little bit here and talk a little bit more about this story. Well, first of all, we'll open up the phone lines, 314-969-KTRS, 1-888-550-KTRS, or star KTRS. This appeared in the New York Times yesterday. It's a long story, and clearly this investigation has been going on for a while. Let me do this. Let me take a quick break. We'll come back. There's more about Chris Koster in this story. I'll tell you more about this story. That is... I don't know. I have not seen anybody else report on this locally. It's a national story. I haven't seen anybody else report on it locally, but you can bet that this story is going to be front and center here at some point in the near future because it's got all the earmarks, right? It's got a popular politician, somebody who's running for governor, right? Republicans are going to jump on this. Other Democrats are going to jump on this as well. This is probably going to get into a mudslinging. No, you took more money. No, you took more money. And, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And if you're going to criticize Republicans for taking money, then by golly, when Democrats do it and it looks bad, they should come under some type of scrutiny as well. So hang tight. We'll take some phone calls, and we'll talk more about this New York Times story, which is going to be
all right.
The
New
York Times story. I guess it was printed last night. It was posted last night online, but it's in the New York Times today. This morning is from the reaction, shocking. People. This is a whispering campaign is going on right now. But this story that's posted and was printed in today's New York Times takes a look at. Chris Koster. It's a long story. The Attorney General of Missouri, who wants to be the next governor of the great state of Missouri. It's a story about how lobbying efforts and money on behalf of clients like 5-hour Energy, like Pfizer, like AT&T, go into attorney general's offices to help lobby them to stop investigatings or to ask about investigations, to slow them down, to to look the other way, pressure federal regulators, favorable treatment, change policies, drop investigations. And Attorney General Chris Koster is a major subject in this story. Now, I've highlighted a couple of parts that I wanted to get to. I read for you in the last segment the initial story with 5 Hour Energy was with Chris Koster at a convention in California. It was the Democratic Attorney General's Association, and the lawyer for 5 Hour Energy came up and said, hey, did you know that the state of Missouri is investigating us? And by the end of the weekend, that investigation had been closed. Now, Attorney General Chris Koster has sat down with the New York Times, and let me go back to the story here. Mr. Koster said he regretted the prominence of groups like DAGA, the Democratic Association, the Democratic Attorney General's Association, and the RAGA, the Republican counterpart, saying the partisanship and increased emphasis on money has been damaging. He tells the New York Times, I wish those two organizations did not exist, during an interview at his office in Kansas City, even though the Democratic group has contributed $1.4 million to his election campaigns, more than any other source. So this group has donated more money to his campaign than any other source, which that's saying something, because the state of Missouri doesn't have any limits. So people can give as much as they want to Chris Koster. Now, let me go back to this story here. This is, I hate to read it, but I'm going to, only because it's so convoluted and it's so nuanced. I want everyone to at least understand what's going on. And you can clearly, I'll post a link to this, and you can certainly go and look for it and read the whole thing yourself. But some of the highlights, let me skip ahead here to midway through the story. In Missouri, as other states, the Attorney General's office has provided a springboard to higher office, either to the governor's mansion or in the Senate. So even before Mr. Koster was sworn in his second term, he was being mentioned as a candidate for higher office, and that made him an ideal target for this law firm, this Dixon Shapiro law firm. The Dixon lawyers have donated to his campaign, invited him and his deputy chief of staff to be featured speakers at law firm events, and hosted Koster at dinners, and stayed in close contact with his office in emails that suggest unusual familiarity. This is from the New York Times. This isn't from a conservative site. This isn't from a liberal site. This is from the New York Times. Well, you can argue that it's liberal or whatever, but this is from an outside area. The relationship seems to have benefited some of Dixon Shapiro's clients. Pfizer, the New York-based pharmaceutical giant, has hired Dixon Shapiro to help settle a case brought against at least 20 states, which accuse the company of illegally marketing two of its drugs, Zyvox and Lyrica, for unapproved uses or making exaggerated claims about their effectiveness. Instead of participating in a unified investigation with other states, which gives attorney generals greater negotiating power, Mr. Koster's office worked directly with Mr. Nash and Pfizer's assistant general counsel, Marcus Green. So Pfizer, 20 states were suing Pfizer because they were illegally marketing two of its drugs. Missouri decided to go alone. Why? Mr. Nash negotiated with the Deputy Attorney General Joseph P. Danderhall through a series of emails following a visit to Missouri in April of 2013. But both Pfizer and Dixon Shapiro had already built a relationship with Mr. Koster. Dixon Shapiro, the law firm, had participated in at least 4 fundraising events for Mr. Koster, with its lawyers and the firm donating $13 million to his campaigns. Several of these contributions came after Mr. Nash had invited Mr. Koster to participate in an executive briefing at the Park Hyatt for Dixon clients. That same day, Mr. Koster held a fundraising event taking in contributions from Mr. Nash and other lawyers involved in matters that Mr. Koster would soon be, or already was, investigating, the records show. Pfizer directly donated $20,000 to Mr. Koster since 2009, more than it gave to any other state attorney general, according to the records. This does not include the $320,000 that Pfizer donated during the same period to the Democratic Attorneys General Association, which in turn has donated $1.4 million to Mr. Koster's campaign. I threw in the 1.4, but that was from earlier. Mr. Koster said his office was forced to negotiate directly with Mr. Nash and Pfizer because a staff lawyer missed a deadline to participate in the multi-state investigation. That was an accident, Mr. Koster said, adding that since he became Attorney General in 2009, his office has participated in 6 cases against Pfizer that brought a total of $26 million to Missouri. But the emails show that just as negotiations on this 2013 case were intensifying, Mr. Koster's deputy chief received an unusual investigation. Would the Attorney General be interested in flying to Chicago to be a keynote speaker at a breakfast that Pfizer was sponsoring for its Political Action Committee? The topic, the importance of corporations building productive relationships with attorney generals. As you know, these relationships are important to allow AGs and corporations to work together to address important public policy issues of concern to both the Attorney General and corporations, the invitation said. The conference participants would also like to hear how these relationships can help the efficiency address Attorney General's questions and concerns before they escalate into major problems, like multi-state investigations or litigations, as well as how they can carry over when AGs are elected to higher offices. Trying now to clear the schedule, wrote back to Dickerson's lawyer before confirming that Mr. Koster would accept the invitation. The folks at Pfizer are very appreciative and excited to hear from the general, a partner at Dixon replied. 5 days later, just before Koster was scheduled to give his speech, Mr. Nash met to discuss a settlement in the fraud investigation. They agreed that Pfizer would pay Missouri $750,000. That's $350,000 less than it would have collected if it had been part of the multi-state investigation. Thank you for the meeting, Mr. Nash wrote. After the settlement meeting in Missouri, Pfizer is pleased. Koster and Missouri received a smaller payment from Pfizer because the state had less leverage after missing the multi-state deadline. Oregon and other states negotiated directly with Pfizer on the Zyvox matter and secured a settlement worth $3.4 million, 4 times what Missouri received, even though Oregon's population is far smaller. Pfizer was not only the Dickerson-Shapiro client pleased with the firm's representation before Koster's office. AT&T was a subject of an investigation by Koster's office, something that Nash learned at the conference held at the Lowe's Hotel in California. And like that lawyer, Mr. Nash pleaded for his case directly to Mr. Koster. 3 weeks after the conversation with Mr. Nash, Mr. Koster's office took a step that questioned the legal strategy of the multi-state investigation of AT&T's billing practices, email records show. Mr. Koster did not officially back out of the inquiry, and Missouri ultimately benefited from a national settlement around this month. But frustrating leaders of the multi-state investigation, Mr. Koster decided to join a small group of attorney generals who, to the industry's pleasure, wanted to resolve the matter without subpoenas or a threat of lawsuit, so says emails. AT&T has been a major contributor to Mr. Koster's political causes, donating more than $27,000 in the last 2 years, half before and half after his actions regarding the investigation. Mr. Koster said the donations have no effect on his actions, adding that it was determined to investigate the company for its deceptive billing practices. With 5 Hour Energy, he added that he pulled out of the investigation because he did not believe it was merited, adding that he personally uses the energy drink. Yet he said he was angry that his staff had not notified him before joining investigations of these 2 companies. Its stock price would move at the mere mention of our involvement, Mr. Koster said, referring to AT&T. Mr. Nash appeals were not finished. The list goes on and on and on. This, if you're just joining us, from a New York Times story that's in today's print edition and was posted late last night about influences of companies to Mr. Koster's campaign while they were investigating him for state practices. 314-969-KTRS, 1-888-550-KTRS, or star KTRS. Those are the phone numbers. Back in a moment on the Big 550 KTRS.